He would carry out Scottsdale's most infamous crime. Robert Fisher brutally murdered his wife and 2 young children, set their home on fire, and vanished. Is he still out there, or did Fisher's disappearing act lead to his own death? I'm Brianna Whitney. Arizona's most notorious killers are the focus of this True Crime Arizona special. It's a story with twists and turns and countless theories and dead ends. Nearly 2 decades ago, Robert Fisher walked out of his house and into a mystery. But the question has always been, what turned the husband and seemingly devoted father into a cold-blooded killer? Digging just below the surface, it was clear Robert Fisher had demons many never saw.
We did things with them as couples, my husband and I. My daughter spent the night at their house. That's somebody you know as a human, as a person, as a dad, as a husband. You would never have the feeling he was gonna kill his whole family.
April 2001, the Fishers, a seemingly picture-perfect suburban family, husband and wife, Robert and Mary, watching their kids grow up, 12-year-old Brittany and 10-year-old Bobby.
How often did you see her and Robert together?
Pretty much a couple times a week, maybe. I mean, he might come by the office to pick her up for lunch, or I'd be at their house, they'd be at our house.
Lori Greenbeck and Mary were very close, but she saw a side of Robert that bothered her.
I know that Robert and Mary had some problems.
Was he controlling?
He was definitely controlling, definitely controlling.
Controlling was just the tip of the iceberg.
When was the last time you saw or talked to Mary?
The day before. The day before she left. She left the office, and she would have been back that next morning.
911 emergency. 74th Street North, there's just an explosion and a fire.
April 10th, neighbors were jolted awake by an explosion.
There are people in there, and this whole house exploded. Were there people inside the house? Yes, there are. They're probably dead.
We got the call for a house fire.
Former Scottsdale police officer TJ Duran was a lead detective at the scene.
Once the fire was ceased, we were looking into the rooms, and you could see the beds. You could see the kids' bodies. And we knew there was a body in the master bedroom. And John and I immediately kind of looked at each other and were like, I think we have a homicide here.
Brittany and Bobby, dead in their beds. Mary was dead in the master bedroom. The only person missing, Robert.
I went to where he was working at the time.
Mayo Clinic.
At the Mayo Clinic on 56th Street.
Robert wasn't at work that day and became the only suspect. The investigation revealed a house of horrors before he disappeared.
He basically almost decapitated them. He slit their throats while they were sleeping in bed. He slit his wife's throat. And then the FU shot was the bullet in the head. Can you fathom somebody that thinks that way? You know, when you're a child and you don't want to sleep with the light off because you're afraid of the boogeyman, for his kids, he was the boogeyman.
Investigators worked backwards to find Robert. Their first clue, a stop at the nearby ATM the night before the explosion. John Heinzelman is the current Scottsdale PD detective on the case.
He took out $280. That's an odd amount.
My personal thought, the ATM was what I'll call a breadcrumb to us, to somebody, to say that I'm not there, I'm smarter than you, I got away.
Surveillance footage showed Robert pull up in Mary's 4Runner, withdraw the cash, get back in the car, and drive away.
He's got a 10 to 12 hour jump on us. So within an hour, he's out of the valley because we found his truck up on the rim. So he's heading north.
My husband and Robert had taken their quads and they'd gone up to Young to go camping.
The week before the murders, that's where he was.
And they rode all over that area. My husband said it was like being out in the woods with Daniel Boone.
On April 20th, 10 days after the explosion, authorities found the Forerunner and Robert's dog Blue alive. Lori's heart sank as she called detectives.
They pull out this big map and my husband's showing them where they camped, and sure enough, that's where they found the truck.
In the exact location?
Yep, right where they'd been. So my husband thinks now he was up there scouting it while they were camping.
In 2004, police thought they had him. A tip from Canada led to police taking a man into custody who fit the description of Fisher.
His appearance was similar to Robert's. He had the missing tooth, he had the back scar, and it wasn't until fingerprint identification was made that was determined that it was just not him.
Could you change your fingertips?
You can't change your fingerprints. You can damage them, you can obliterate them, but even that creates your own unique, I guess, fingerprint identifications.
You don't think there's any way that that was Robert Fisher?
No, that was not him.
Do you believe Robert Fisher is dead or alive?
It's 50-50, Eileen, that he's still alive.
From the outside looking in, Robert Fisher could only be described as one thing.
He's a monster. It's that simple.
It makes you totally question your own judgment. How could nobody have had any idea he was capable of that?
The Robert Fisher in these home videos was a facade, and the innocent got caught in his lie.
I hope he's dead. I hope he is. And if Mary had ever had any idea, she would have been out of there. And the kids. It's crazy. After all this time, how it's still painful.
Robert Fisher remains on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. Scottsdale police are still investigating new credible tips right now.
Coming up on True Crime Arizona, Notorious Killers.
I yelled, Christy, Christy, where are you?
A 13-year-old girl on her paper route 36 years ago, disappearing just yards away from her mom.
She said, I'm so sorry to tell you, but we found her body down at the apartment complex.
And the man behind the killing,
Phoenix was not a place where children got murdered.
who tried to deceive everyone, including her parents. That's next after the break. From Arizona's family, this is a True Crime Arizona special, Notorious Killers.
In 1984, you'd often see boys and girls out delivering newspapers. It was a common job for teens back then, a job 13-year-old Christy Ann Fornoff loved. But on a warm May night, the paper girl vanished on her route with her mom just around the corner. And ultimately, the killer would try to trick police and everyone involved in the case.
It was just this whole eerie feeling around the complex. By chance, we just literally went to his apartment and knocked on the door. I can't remember exactly what we had asked him, but he had invited us into his apartment. It's just really spooky finding out later about circumstances and realizing that you were in the same apartment with this man.
Where she died.
Where she died.
News photographer Jim Fry unknowingly was standing feet away from where Christy Ann Fornoff was murdered, talking to the murderer himself.
I wasn't certain. You thought that there's a possibility that this man is actually telling you the truth.
He wasn't, and it all began days earlier on May 9th, 1984.
Christy was the outgoing child. She was the one who charmed people.
The 13-year-old had been a paper girl for 5 months.
Roger, mostly him. Me occasionally would take our station wagon and throw the papers in the back and would go with the kids.
They jumped on and off the tailgate in those days.
But on this May evening, Christy remembered she needed to go back to the Rocky Point Apartments in Tempe.
She said, Mom, you know what? I have someone I need to collect from. They told me to come back. well, I'll just go with you.
Christy jumped on her brother's bike, and Carol Fornoff walked with their dog to the nearby complex, where a tenant came out to chat with Carol.
So Christy said, Mom, after a few minutes, I'm going to go. You know where I'm going to go. Yes, I know where you are, honey. I'll meet you there in a few minutes. I don't know, it just had this edgy feeling. So I went to that apartment complex. Jason's bicycle was outside the gate, and I just kind of stood there at first and listened. I don't hear any speaking. I don't hear anything. Knock on the couple's door, and I said, Christy's bicycle is out here. Do you know where she is?
Christy was nowhere to be found.
13-year-old newspaper carrier disappeared.
The apartment's maintenance man, 29-year-old Don Beaty, jumped in to help Roger Fornoff look for his daughter. He had keys to every apartment in the building.
So he just really embedded himself with the investigation to help.
We went through storage sheds. We went through everything on the property.
Days went by, no sign of Christy.
And I said, you know, if you've got Christy, let her go, and we would forgive you. Please let her go. So it was a matter of begging for her, which I would do anything to get her back.
Days later, a police chaplain showed up at the Fornoff's door.
He said, I'm so sorry to tell you, but we found her body down at the apartment complex.
Maintenance man Don Beaty found the body, a turning point in the case. He was now the prime suspect. Officers were on to Beaty already, swabbing his apartment for any DNA evidence. But he thought he had everyone fooled.
The entire apartment was covered in graphite. It is the powder that they use for fingerprint making. Countertops, sofa, floors, walls, bathtubs, sinks. He made some comment about, he's got to clean this up, and it's just, he doesn't know how he's going to do it.
Jim Fry says Beaty acted as if all of this was an inconvenience.
He felt like he was just this victim of circumstances. I don't know why they came into my apartment looking for evidence. I just don't know why. And he kept that going for the entire interview.
If anybody out there finds a body and they're going to have to go through the same thing I'm going through, well, I feel sorry for that person.
The evidence came back. Christy's DNA, blood, and vomit found in Beaty's closet. Evidence of rape on her young body.
Well, we're hoping and praying that she did not experience that before she was choked. And to be full peace about that, I have to just choose what I believe, that she was not aware.
Beaty's first trial left everyone stunned.
First one was a hung jury.
The first one was a hung jury, and I truly don't understand how it was a hung jury. I mean, the evidence that they presented was just so overwhelming, and okay, what went wrong?
But Beaty would slip up in jail before his second trial.
He just was talking, and he said, I didn't mean to kill her, but she was crying for her mother. And the guard went, what?
What did you say?
This time, he was sentenced to death.
Did you want Don to get the death penalty?
Yes.
I have to say yes.
Barrett Marson was the communications director for the Department of Corrections in 2011. He remembers a crafty Don Beaty doing anything he could to get out of being put to death.
He had ordered ice cream and cookies and regular Coke and all those things, but we figured out he was really just trying to put himself into a diabetic coma because he did not want to die.
As his life was coming to an end, Beaty had something he wanted to say.
When you think back to his execution, is there one memory of that day that really sticks out in your mind?
Oh, it really was his last words. He had been counseled a lot by his family to say something and take responsibility. And he did.
It would be the first time he'd publicly say sorry to the Fornoff family.
Each one of us felt he looked directly into our eyes alone. He said, you will see your daughter in heaven. In his own way, he apologized, and we all felt at ease about it.
I think a lot of people would ask how you found it in yourselves to forgive him.
I think it was only because of the early on feeling when she was missing that night that I know what a forgiving child Christy is. And I knew that she would want us to forgive the man.
For For decades now, Roger and Carol Fornoff have hosted retreats at their home in Northeast Arizona for parents of murdered children. They say Christy's memory has given them the strength to help other families find peace who have lost children in this same horrific way.
Coming up on True Crime Arizona, Notorious Killers, a gruesome discovery, a frozen body preserved after death.
He felt those bags and said, I believe I feel an arm.
Kept as a trophy by the killer himself for years. The case of the cold storage killer.
I do believe there's other victims.
Coming up next. From Arizona's family, this is a True Crime Arizona special, Notorious Killers.
A case that began years earlier, nearly 400 miles away, ended in tragedy inside a freezer on a quiet man's driveway. His secret was in plain sight, but it would take a couple's hunch to crack the case. And though the case is solved, investigators believe there's still more to the cold storage killer they've yet to uncover. A home quiet and unassuming, tucked away in a cozy neighborhood just outside Prescott, Arizona. Inside, the gruesome reality of a violent psychopath.
How many other licenses of other girls or women did you find?
Probably 8 to 12, somewhere around there. And a lot of different clothing, female clothing, dresses, underwear, shoes.
And worse.
I found what I called an abduction kit. It was a little box that had another pair of handcuffs. It had duct tape.
The home belonged to John Famalaro, who would meet an inquisitive couple at the swap meet down the road in the summer of 1994.
He said he had come from California 6 months earlier, and he was painting houses, and he had a lot of leftover paint.
Jack and Elaine Court also sold paint and owned a paint supply business in Phoenix. So they made a deal with John to buy some from him at his house. Right away, they noticed something off, the large moving truck in his driveway.
The Ryder truck that he had told us he used to move back was sitting alongside of his driveway, and grass had grown up 6 or 8 inches around the wheels. So at that point, it was kind of obvious that the truck hadn't been turned back in.
Jack told Elaine to write down the license plate number and serial number. What they didn't realize is what their suspicions would end up leading to days later.
So you have all this information about this truck. Where do you go with it next?
Well, Steve, who is a friend of ours, he was in charge of the stolen vehicle department in Phoenix. Jack mentioned to him about this suspicion that he had of this Ryder truck. And he turned to me and asked me, do you still have that information? So I pulled it out and gave it to Steve, and he said, okay. He said, I'll call it in.
Yavapai County Sheriff Scott Masher was called out to the scene. Inside the Ryder truck was a large freezer with electrical wires coming out the back.
There was big black plastic bags in there, and you could tell something was in it. He felt those bags and said, I believe I feel an arm. And we cut open the bags, and the first thing I think I remembered seeing were some handcuffs and hands. I felt it was a female just from the manicured fingernails, but you know, I wasn't positive at that point what we had, other than there was a body in the freezer.
A horrific discovery that would lead authorities to search John Famalaro's home.
The more we searched, we found a hammer with blood and what appeared to be tissue on it. We found other handguns, newspapers of a missing person out of California, Denise Huber.
It's been 3 days and no one can find
23-year-old Denise Huber had gone missing in 1991 after leaving a concert to drive back to her Newport Beach home.
Last time we saw her, she got ready to go to the concert. She stuck her head in the door. We were watching television, and she just said, I love you both, and don't worry about me, and she left.
Denise Huber's body in a freezer inside.
Over the years, as the search went cold, her parents' hope was fading.
I didn't give up. I was looking for her.
When they all got the news her body had been found, they had no idea how John Famalaro knew Denise. They found an LA County Sheriff's uniform in Famalaro's house. Masher believes he pretended to be an officer to help Denise with her flat tire on the side of the highway that night.
What I believed was Famalaro, whether he was in his police uniform, had his abduction kit, stopped to render aid. He tried to abduct her. She may have struggled. He hit her with the hammer, and then he took her to the storage shed. We collected evidence of sexual assault, and I believe that's when he probably at some point then used the nail bar to kill her.
Her parents were stunned.
When she was found, it was final. She was never going to come back. We were never going to be able to find her, and it was all over then.
The question that everybody has is, do you believe there are more victims out there?
I do. I don't think this was the first time he had done something like this. We had interviewed some other girls. It was very troubling interviews on how he treated them, what he had done to them. One girl felt she escaped from being killed by him. She had to run from him.
He knows the quiet home in the hills still has secrets kept by the cold storage killer.
I do believe there's other victims, and I'd like to know who they are, where they are.
John Famalaro was sentenced to death. He now awaits execution in a California prison. We'll be right back.
From Arizona's family, this is a True Crime Arizona special, Notorious Killers.
The focus of this special is on these 3 notorious killers. But if you want to hear more of our in-depth investigations into some of the most captivating cases, check out True Crime Arizona, the podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher. Thanks for watching our special True Crime Arizona Notorious Killers. I'm Brianna Whitney.